Welcome to my channel. Listen to my stories every day. Comment, like and subscribe to my channel. Enjoy listening.
My name is Eric, and at 43, I thought I had most of my life figured out. Olivia and I celebrated our 10th anniversary just last month, a milestone marred only by the absence of children. I'm infertile, a fact that we've navigated with the resilience of a vessel steadfast against relentless waves. Yet, despite this, our marriage remains strong, or so I believed. Lately, Olivia's been different. It's subtle changes mostly, how she smiles less when I recount my day, or the way she avoids eye contact as though my gaze might unveil her innermost thoughts. At night, the bed feels colder, her silhouette turned away, breathing in a rhythm that feels like a silent confession to ears that aren't mine. This morning was like any other, except it wasn't. Olivia was humming in the shower, a tune that seemed foreign, yet hauntingly sweet. As I prepared breakfast, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with my unease. "Morning, love," I said as she entered the kitchen, her hair still damp, curling slightly at the ends. "Morning," she replied, her voice a melody that didn't quite reach her eyes. She pecked me on the cheek, her touch fleeting. I watched her eat, her appetite seemingly vanished overnight. "You're not eating much. Everything okay?" I ventured, trying to sound casual. She paused, a spoon midway to her mouth. "Yeah, just not very hungry these days. Must be the stress at work." "Stress?" I echoed, frowning. Olivia's job at the local library was a source of joy for her, not distress. "Yeah, new management, more demands," she explained, setting the spoon down with a clatter. I nodded, though my mind raced. My thoughts were interrupted by the ping of her phone. Reflexively, her hand shot out to silence it, but not before I caught a glimpse of the screen, a heart emoji followed by a question mark. She noticed my glance and quickly turned the screen away. "It's just Sarah from work," she said too quickly, stuffing the phone in her pocket. The rest of the day, that image haunted me, the heart, the secrecy. It was unlike Olivia to hide things from me. As the hours dragged on, my mind spun wild scenarios. Was she really at work all those evenings she came home late? Who was sending her those texts? Dinner was a quiet affair. Olivia talked about a new book she was reading, but the conversation felt strained. Afterwards, she excused herself to go to bed early, claiming a headache. I lingered at the table, lost in thought. It was then I made a decision. I needed to know. Was my wife, the woman I shared a decade of my life with, slipping away from me? The thought gnawed at me, an uninvited guest that refused to leave. Tomorrow, I resolved, I would follow her. Not because I wanted to, but because the fear of not knowing was worse than the potential heartbreak of confirmation. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, the house seemed to whisper secrets in the dark, each creak a syllable of a larger, looming confession. The next morning, I watched Olivia with an intensity one hadn't felt in years. She seemed oblivious to my scrutiny, lost in her routine of brewing coffee and buttering toast. My decision to follow her loomed over me like a dark cloud, and I felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the gnawing suspicion that had taken root in my heart. "Eric, are you sure you're okay? You seem off today," Olivia said, eyeing me with a concerned frown as she sipped her coffee. I forced a smile, just a bit tired, nothing to worry about. "Big day at the office today." It wasn't entirely a lie. The weight of what I was about to do made it feel monumental. "All right, just don't work yourself too hard," she advised, giving me a quick kiss before grabbing her bag and heading out the door. I waited anxiously for a few minutes before following her, keeping a safe distance as I drove. My heart pounded as I tailed her car through the bustling morning traffic. She took the familiar route towards downtown, but instead of heading towards the library, she turned off towards the medical district. Curiosity pricked at me as I watched her park in front of a large, imposing building, the city hospital. I parked a few cars back and followed her inside, keeping out of sight. Inside the hospital, she paused at the reception and then headed towards the elevators. I mingled with a group of visitors to blend in, catching the same elevator just in time. She pressed the button for the third floor, ultrasound. The doors opened, and she stepped out, heading down the corridor. I waited a few seconds before following. Peering around the corner, I saw her enter one of the rooms. My mind raced. Ultrasound? Was Olivia pregnant? But that couldn't be, not with me. Unable to go further without drawing attention, I found a nearby waiting area. My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. That's when I heard a familiar voice. Eric? What are you doing here? It was Janet, a family friend who worked as a nurse. Caught off guard, I stammered, just here for a checkup. Routine stuff. What about you? I work here, remember? Are you sure you're okay? You look pale, she said, her brow creased with worry. Before I could reply, another voice cut in. Janet, could you help me with Eric? Is that you? I turned to see Dr. Phillips, my cousin and a radiologist at this hospital. Hey, James, I greeted him, trying to keep my voice steady. What brings you here? Is everything all right? James asked, his professional concern evident. Just checking up on some health stuff, I lied again, feeling the weight of deceit pressing down on me. If you need anything, let me know, okay? We're family, James offered warmly. Thanks, I will, I assured him, feeling a mix of gratitude and betrayal. As they walked away, I was left alone with my thoughts. What was Olivia doing here? Was she really pregnant? And if so, who was the father? Determined to uncover the truth, I decided my next step would be to confront her, but not here, not now. I needed proof, and I needed to be prepared for whatever answers lay ahead. With a heavy heart, I left the hospital, the shadows of suspicion growing longer with each step. The drive home felt longer than usual, my mind a tangled mess of fear, suspicion, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. Every red light was a moment to relive Olivia's distant behaviors, her secretive smiles at her phone, the unanswered questions. By the time I reached our driveway, my resolve had hardened. Today would be the day I confronted her. I barely had time to settle my racing thoughts when Olivia's car pulled up. She stepped out, looking unusually serene. The sight of her so calm while my world was upending only fueled my growing storm of emotions. Olivia, we need to talk, I said as soon as she walked in, my voice more forceful than I intended. She looked taken aback, a slight frown creasing her brow. Sure, what's on your mind? In the kitchen, I said, leading the way. I didn't want to have this conversation standing in the entryway like some sort of casual chat. As we sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the air thick with tension, I didn't waste any time. I saw you at the hospital today, I began, watching her reaction closely. Olivia's face paled, her eyes widening slightly. You were at the hospital? Yes, and I saw you going into the ultrasound room. Why, Olivia? Why were you there? I pressed, trying to keep my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. For a moment, she was silent, her fingers nervously twiddling with the edge of the tablecloth. Then, she took a deep breath. Eric, I didn't know how to tell you this. A cold dread settled over me. Tell me what? I'm pregnant, she whispered, her voice barely audible. The words hit me like a physical blow. Pregnant. The one thing we both knew wasn't possible with me. How, Olivia? How can you be pregnant? I asked, my voice cracking with the strain of holding back emotions. It just happened, she started, her voice trembling. I met someone else. It wasn't planned. It just happened. The simplicity of her confession did nothing to suit the betrayal. Who is he? I demanded. She hesitated, then met my gaze, her own eyes filled with tears. "It's your brother, Mark." The revelation was another jolt, sending a ripple of shock through me. My brother. My own flesh and blood. How long? I managed to ask, though each word felt like lifting a boulder. "A few months," she replied quietly. "I'm so sorry, Eric. I never meant for any of this to happen." The apology felt empty, inadequate. I stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You're sorry? For which part, Olivia? For lying, for betraying me, or for doing it with my own brother?" "I know sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have right now," she said, tears starting to stream down her face. I needed air, space to think away from the suffocating atmosphere of betrayal that now filled our home. "I need some time to think about all this," I said, heading towards the door. "Eric, please." I didn't look back. I couldn't. Not yet. I walked out, the evening air crisp against my flushed face. I didn't know where I was going, but I walked anyway, each step an effort to distance myself from the pain, the lies, and the crumbling remains of what I once thought was a happy marriage. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, anger, and deep, unrelenting sorrow. Each morning, I awoke with the hope that it had all been a nightmare, but the empty space in our bed where Olivia used to sleep reminded me of the harsh reality. She had moved out, staying with a friend until we could figure out what to do next. I avoided Mark completely, unable to face the brother who betrayed me. Instead, I spent days walking aimlessly, nights drinking more than I should. It was during one such night, in the dimly lit corner of a local bar, that I decided I needed closure, needed to confront Mark. It was the only way I could think of to possibly move past this. The next day, I drove to his apartment, my hands trembling slightly as I knocked on his door. The wait felt like an eternity until he answered, his expression wary upon seeing me. "Eric, Save it, Mark. We need to talk," I cut him off, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. He nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The apartment was as I remembered, though now every detail seemed to remind me of his betrayal. "Why, Mark? Why her?" I asked, the question that had been haunting me finally voiced aloud. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't planned, Eric. It started off as us just talking, and then it just happened." "That's what she said. Is that supposed to make me feel better?" I scoffed, feeling a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "I know it doesn't. I'm sorry, Eric. Truly, I am," he said earnestly. I shook my head, frustration and hurt battling within. "And the baby? What are you planning to do?" "We're going to keep it," he replied, his voice firmer. "I want to take responsibility for my actions." As the words sank in, my anger gave way to a weary resignation. "And Olivia? What about her?" Before he could answer, a knock at the door interrupted us. Mark looked confused but went to answer it. I heard hushed voices before he returned, followed by a woman I didn't recognize at first. My heart stopped when I realized who it was, Janet, the nurse from the hospital. "Eric, there's something you need to know," Janet began, her voice gentle. She glanced at Mark, who nodded. "What's going on?" I demanded, my confusion growing. "It's about the baby," Janet hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Eric, you're not infertile. There was a mix-up at the clinic years ago. You're capable of fathering a child. The baby Olivia is carrying, it's yours, not Mark's." The room spun as her words hit me like a wave. "What? But, how? We were told. The records were switched. I discovered the mistake recently when reviewing some files," Janet explained. "I'm so sorry you had to find out this way." Mark looked as shocked as I felt. "I had no idea, Eric. I thought." "No, I held up a hand, needing a moment to process. The anger, the betrayal, all melted into an overwhelming relief mixed with disbelief. My brother wasn't the villain I had made him out to be, and I wasn't the victim of an infidelity I thought had broken my marriage. "I need to see Olivia," I said suddenly, urgency propelling my words. Mark nodded, giving me her address. I left immediately, my steps quickening as the need to reconcile with Olivia, to explain and to hopefully forgive, filled me. When I reached the place where Olivia was staying, I knocked, my heart in my throat. She opened the door, her eyes widening in surprise. "Eric, what are you?" "I know everything, Olivia. The baby, it's mine. We're not." There was a mix-up. Tears filled her eyes as understanding dawned. "Eric, I'm so sorry for everything. We talked for hours, unraveling the misunderstandings and the pain of the past days. It wasn't easy, and the path to healing was just beginning, but as we sat there, together, a new hope bloomed. Maybe, just maybe, we could leave the shadows of the past behind and step into the light of a new beginning.